Hi, so I wanted to make a video tonight about a few different things, about midlife crises, about what happens when your world gets rocked by outside events, but really focusing on midlife, because I think midlife it's a funny time of your life. On the one hand, you are coming to terms with a sort of, but maybe a bit of a death rebirth process. Maybe that's a bit of what a midlife crisis is about. And then on the other hand, you have issues like elderly parents and things like this, which can be a lot as well. So it's like your inner world can be exploding, but your outer world, by the time you're midlife, you're usually quite stable. You might have a stable job, you might have a stable relationship, things look okay on the surface. But what happens when they're not okay underneath, and how do you cope? There will be a spiritual element to this, because there always is, and I'm going to talk about this in relation to my own life because of what I've been going through. And I need to add a trigger warning that I'm going to be talking about grief of an unborn child. For me, it was grief for a child that I never had. It was just wanting a child. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that as well. So, if any of that is of interest, that's great. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and we'll see how this goes. So I wanted to make a video because for me personally, I've been in a cycle, I guess, and I feel like I'm closing out a cycle at the moment of my life, a pretty significant one. So for me, it was ageing parents and those sort of problems in my early 40s. My mum got Alzheimer's and dementia. And that was really, a shock, I think, for all of us, because she was still quite young, really. She was only in her mid-60s when she got a diagnosis. And so we were dealing with that. And one thing I realised is that if you don't have your own relationship or your own life that's really quite solid, when your parents get ill, then it's very easy to just get sucked into being a satellite around their lives, I guess, and around those problems. And that can be a bit of an issue, obviously, because it can mean that you end up benching really important decisions in your life, like, say, having a child of your own or things like this. If indeed you're still able. I was at an age where I was already, in serious place with regards fertility and all the rest of it. So there's that. And then on top of that, any other issues that you're going through as well. So for me, it was dealing with my mum's progressive illness, which was really, really tough. It was a lot going on there. And then at some point during that, I realised I wasn't going to be having a baby, which had been a dream. And so I started to grieve for the child I never had. And then both my parents got ill. Then sadly, both of my parents passed away. Then I did the grieving for them. Then also I ended up continuing grieving for the unborn child when I'd been grieving for them. Then I got ill myself. I got loads of digestive issues, and then COVID came along. So all of that, and then all of the compression with COVID as well, and everything just squeezing in, the walls closing in, And so I find myself now, I said to a friend the other day, I feel like I'm in a death rebirth cycle because I feel like I'm coming back to life. Where I've moved, it felt like the most beautiful place, and it was lovingly holding me when I first moved here. It's in the woods, it's lovely. Now it feels like it's entombing me, because it's so silent, because it's so peaceful. And now I don't want peace and silence anymore. So I find like I'm bursting with life, but I'm about to turn 50. So that's peculiar. And I think I've dealt with an awful lot of issues. I've crunched through some serious emotions and processed them. And that's amazing. And it's amazing to be coming out the other side with regards just feeling alive again, feeling more alive than I dared hope, I guess, or ever dreamt I would as I hit, 50 myself. And I think an awful lot of people are probably going through similar things, because there's the grief that you talk about, which is grief of parents or grief of other relatives or friends or loved ones, etc. But then there's grief too of things that we don't tend to talk about as a, in our society, like say grief of a child you've never had. You're grieving for something that you thought that you would have, but you never had. And that can be kind of a big deal as well, because that can be significantly painful too. And so I don't really have any, there's no magic wand for getting through any of this. For me, having a spiritual perspective is probably what's carried me a significant part of this journey. So I talk in some of my videos, I talk about my spiritual path. I've been on a spiritual path on and off for 20 years, and I sort of fell into it by accident, by picking up a book in a bookshop and getting a feeling like an epiphany. And that started me off on a journey where I was just hungry for spiritual experience. And then some years ago in 2012, I had a plant medicine retreat. And on that retreat, I had an experience that we were all one consciousness. So I had an experience of this vast sea of loving consciousness in which we are all held and we're all a part of. And I think that carried me through an awful lot of the darker times, through the more difficult times, because I understand that that is real. Although it's now just a memory and a faded memory at that, but I understand that that is real, And so I think if you are struggling, if you have any sort of spiritual or religious beliefs that you can lean into, I think that can really carry you a lot of the way. And I think that's really, really important, So I think if you can lean into that, that will help an awful lot. And things like meditation to that end. I talk a bit about meditation as well. I think one of the most important things any human can probably do is learn to meditate. And probably once you're an adult, so once you've got your ego boundaries in place, because if you meditate when you're very young, you can just waft away with the fairies, you really can. You need to be grounded. So you need to be grounded in your practical life. You need to be able to stand firm, hold your boundaries, stand your ground. But if you can meditate as well, and then you can learn a little bit about what lies beyond in a way, and find that peace and find that silence and find that stillness. And that can really carry you a bit as well, because some people liken meditation to a toolbox for the mind. It really can be like that, because you can find that inner peace even when the world around you is in turmoil, including your own circumstances, because you understand intrinsically that everything in this world falls away. We are infinite beings housed in finite bodies on a finite planet with everything around us it will one day crumble. So you can hang on to your possessions, you can hang on to a job title, you can hang on to all of these things that make you in your mind, that your ego helps to form an idea of your identity. But ultimately they will go, they will fade away. And then who are you after that? And I think that can be a challenge too for people who find themselves newly having left work and becoming pensioners themselves, because our identity, our ego mind likes to hang on to external things to help inform its identity. It just does. So if you get a new cool job title, your ego's like, hey, this is cool. It really does a little bit, and you have to watch it. But it will do that. So in our society as well, very often we have the idea of who we are intrinsically linked to what we do. If you meet someone at a party, you'll say, what do you do? What do you do for a living? And we've intertwined these two things. And that doesn't even begin to touch the depths of who somebody is on a soul level. It's very surface-oriented stuff. But it's how we identify ourselves and other people. So, of course, when things start to fall away, at whatever age, we can find ourselves in a bit of trouble, And I think that can be the case in midlife too. As I say, when you get to about 45, 50, you suddenly wake up and you're in a different phase of your life. Jung talked about this. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung talked a lot about individuation. And individuation in a nutshell, roughly, loosely speaking, is what happens when you're in your midlife phase and you start to analyse your life. You start to just look at your life with a different lens, because here you are, your midlife. You're going to have a different idea as to what you want out of it, who you are, all the rest of it, you know, because you've got less time left as much as anything else. Personally, I think that midlife naturally encompasses a more transpersonal approach. So in your youth, you tend to be a bit more self-oriented, a bit more selfish pursuits. What can you get out of life? And when you get to your 40s, you start to look a bit about what can I give back? How can I help? How can I be of help to a wider community, etc. So it just gets a bit more transpersonal. But that doesn't mean that the ego is quite happy to shed any ideas of identity or shed any old dreams or anything like that at all. Part of the other problem, as I see it, is because we wrap ourselves up in permanence. You know, we go out to work day in, day out. We have permanent homes that we come home to every single day. We tend to have the same routine. And very often we don't even realise we're stuck in a rut or stuck in a routine. And we do the same things in our job as well very often. But our bodies are obviously growing and changing all the time. You know, we are not stable beings. And the planet we live on is not, just this static being either. Nothing in life is really static. But we try to make things static, and then suddenly we wake up in our 40s and we suddenly look at the world around us and go, wow, okay, I'm older now. Things have changed, and they're irrevocably changed. You can't go back. You can't turn a clock back, you know? So you have to incorporate that into your identity, and then you have to look at what you're doing. And I think a midlife crisis, because I had a first midlife crisis a few years ago, and that to me was a bit like the Greek god Janus, who looks forward and backward at the same time. That was what I was doing. I was simultaneously looking forward and I was simultaneously evaluating where I'd been, all at the same time. So I thought, great, midlife crisis done, no bother, all good. And then now I seem to be undergoing a second one. It's fine, it is what it is, you know. But I think there can be a lot going on under the surface as we try and reincorporate new ideas of who we are and new ideas of this finite nature of our own mortality that we really start to face, you know, and especially with COVID, of course. But just because when you get to midlife, and especially being a woman, because you've got menopause and all of that, which adds its own challenges and difficulties into the equation. And that can be quite humbling, and it can be quite tricky to traverse, and you're still trying to hang on to ideas of your own identity, but your body and your mind, everything, it can have different ideas, you know. So, firstly, if you're struggling and you find yourself in a similar position, you're not alone. You're not alone. These are really difficult issues. And I would recommend to anybody, if you're struggling, talk to somebody. First thing to do, talk to someone. If you've got a good friend, talk to them. Try and spread it around a bit. Don't overburden any one person. If you're going to do like a mind dump, try not to do that. So yeah, try and talk to people. Try and talk to a counsellor, if you can talk to a counsellor maybe. And process your emotions. Be with them, sit with them. Don't try and stuff them down. Don't try and repress them. You know, it's a very sort of old school thing to do anyway, but some people still do it. Some people don't even realise. And I would say especially men, because I think men just can struggle a little bit with emotions, with talking about them and expressing them. You know, they're brought up to not really do that. So it can be an issue. So I would say talk to people. Just talk to people. Talk it out. Talk it out. And obviously, if you need support, try and get support in place. If you're having issues with elderly parents, if anyone is in a care home or they're starting to suffer at home and you're feeling a bit overburdened, definitely talk to somebody about that as well, because it is a lot. It's a lot to carry. It's the normal state of affairs and it happens, but that doesn't lessen the impact of it mentally and emotionally. It can be a lot. And it can sort of floor you in ways that you don't even see coming, you know. So definitely try to talk to somebody. And as I say, if you can meditate, you know, it's such a buzzword these days. It's difficult. It can be difficult. You know, they don't call it the monkey mind for no reason. You sit and you try to meditate and you can wrestle with your mind. And the idea is that you just try and let go. Not even try, you just let go and whatever comes, you know, and really try and surrender to it. Because if you fight it, that's, you know, it's just going to make it harder. So yeah, so there's that. So if you've got any spirituality, lean into that. And if you don't really, but you're interested, meditation is a great place to start. I would recommend alternative health therapies as well. Obviously, they need to come with a sort of buyer beware caveat because it's an unregulated industry. So just do a bit of research, but also lean in to your intuition and what feels good naturally. Things like Reiki, I don't think you can really go wrong with a Reiki session. And that can actually be quite powerful as well. It sounds just like this nice bit of fluff, but it can really help with emotional issues. So I would say try a bit of Reiki. I've also had shamanic healing, so I'd recommend that. And I'd also recommend light language healing, which looks bonkers, but again is quite a powerful healing modality in my experience. So I'd recommend leaning in a little bit to the spiritual, to these spiritual healing modalities. Obviously, they come with caveats. As I say, there's no guarantees. Do a bit of homework, talk to a doctor beforehand. You know, all of the usual sort of caveats apply. And also they can come with a side effect, as can meditation. And the side effect is that you will open up a doorway to spirit yourself potentially. So just be aware of that and factor that in, you know. So yeah, so these would be my recommendations. It's, as I say, life is never stable, and by the time you get to your mid-40s or whatever, you're starting to feel a bit more settled, you're starting to feel a bit more stable sometimes. And then along come these really destabilising elements, and a midlife crisis alone is destabilising. Menopause can be destabilising. Yeah, all of that. For me, I've realised that, as I said, I've completed a chapter in my life. And I feel like I was in a death rebirth phase, and I feel like I've come out the other side of that, which is great. But it does mean that the future feels a bit like a tabula rasa, feels like a bit of a blank slate, but alive with potential and possibility. And then I've got to try and rein in some of my impulses at the moment because partly because of menopause maybe as well. There are days when I could tear my own skin off, get a plane ticket and just go anywhere. And I'm not even kidding. So I've had to sort of sit with that as well. I've had all sorts of impulses, all sorts of just real yearnings and desires and interests in life and just wanting to do everything different and not even being able to bear, as I say, coming home to myself, coming home alone. At times I just want to go out, I just want to be doing things, I just want to rip it all up and start again. You know, that's how I feel inside. So I'm trying to just sort of sit with that and see how it goes. And of course that isn't an absolute stable state of affairs either, like everything else. So some days that can be quite strong. They can be quite strong feelings. And then other days it's much easier to handle and much less. And then another day I might not be feeling it at all, you know? So it's just like waves coming in and, you know, just trying to sort of sit with that and make a bit of sense of it really. And what I'm doing to make sense of it. So the last 4 years of my life have been very logic oriented. I've had to sort out various affairs. I've had to, just be in my left brain, basically. Just logic, reason, rationality, trying to bottom line things, trying to just make sense of things. So it's been a real sort of logical sense making process and feeling my way forward and using my mind to do that completely. Whereas now I feel like I'm in an entirely different place. I feel like what's required now is that I lean into the divine feminine and I lean into intuition and gut instinct and, you know, and it's it's mad at times, because you feel like you just want to dance. And so I do, and you feel like you want to take a moonlight walk, or you want to, but it's all about leaning into feelings. So it's leaning in to just flashes of insight, or a feeling, or an intuition. And these can just be a glancing little tiny feeling that you just get a hint. Just get a hint of a something, but that can be enough to steady your course, if that makes any sense. There's no, it's no left brain stuff going on. But my left brain doesn't like it, because it wants to get involved. It's so used to getting involved now. It's so used to being at the helm, that I'm trying to just sort of let that go a little bit as well. And left brain stuff, it can all be about overthinking. And in the last 4 years, because of COVID, I was constantly scanning the horizon for threats. I was very much in hypervigilant mode, and I understand that. And I understand that isn't a healthy place to be in either. So again, I've just dropped that as much as I can. So yeah, if you find yourself struggling, try and find anchor points in your life. Friends, family, animals, gratitude, keeping a gratitude journal, doing whatever you can to anchor yourself in the reality that you are, shedding any resentment, shedding any dark feelings, any toxic feelings, or anything like that at all. And just being present as much as you can. And if painful emotions arise, and they can, just working through them. As I say, you can't repress, because as Carl Jung says, anything you repress, it just comes back up stronger. So the idea is that you acknowledge it, you sit with it, you work through it, you transmute it. It's alchemy. You're transmuting the darkness into light. You're getting your gratitude, you're getting your things, and you're working out your pain. You're sitting with it, you're acknowledging it, you're not turning away from it, you're not belittling it, you're not trying to say, hey, some people, sometimes if people talk about wanting to make changes in their life, and Jonna Jinton did this the other day, she made a video where she said in her video she just wasn't particularly happy where she was at the moment. She was just thinking about her circumstances and reevaluating. Instantly people pop up to say, you should be lucky, you should be grateful, you're really lucky, you've got so much going for you, you should be lucky. And I thought, these guys are missing the point. She's obviously grateful, she's obviously lucky. It isn't about that. It's about what life means to you. And the only person that can answer that is each individual. No one else can prescribe for anyone else, however much you might want to. You might want to go, look at you, you've got an amazing life. Don't chuck it away to go and, do something crazy, etc., etc. No one can prescribe for anyone. Ultimately, what matters is that every one of us comes away at the end of our lives and thinks we've lived our lives well. We have a life well lived and well loved. That we haven't hidden from life out of fear, or if we have, we've course corrected and we've managed to be brave and do the things we've needed to do at times. And we're all of us going to have regrets, because that's life too, and we're fallible humans. So absolutely nobody comes out of this saintly. Everybody has done something. But we all have to try and make sense of it. And so what makes sense to one person will not make sense to another. And so it isn't anything to do with gratitude or anything like that. So if you're finding yourself in a place where your life is no longer making sense and you might need to make changes, bear in mind the people around you who will go, oh no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Look, you've got your life and it's amazing. Just ride it out. Just ride it out. Bear that in mind. But ultimately, the choice has to be yours. And what I would say is, if you can just ride out any wild impulses for a time until you start to get a sense of what you might want to do, or temper that by leaning into your intuition and seeing what that helps, what that guides you towards. Because I think our intuition doesn't steer us wrong. And our instinct doesn't steer us wrong. So long as we're acting on those and not acting out of a knee-jerk reactionary way because of something else, so I'd say lean into those areas a little bit, and be aware that, yeah, of course people are going to say things like that, but ultimately your life has to make sense to you. And that might mean doing something a bit mad. It might mean going abroad for a time, or just you know, sometimes a change of scene is necessary in order to clear your head and to get a bit of a sense of what's next. None of us truly know for anybody else. So that's the point there, really. So if you're finding yourself in that position, you're not alone. You're not alone at all. And I think it is in part, for me, a sort of equal and opposite reaction to what's happened over the last, 10 plus years of my life, and especially with the COVID years, because they were so constricty. And then now I'm only just starting to go out again and sort of live my life again a bit now. And trying to make sense of it all. And my head was just not in a space where I was thinking about what was next. Not really. And now I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, I'm moving on. Okay, cool. What's next? What am I doing? Don't know. Absolutely no clue. But that's exciting in a way as well. And sometimes it can feel very discombobulating, and sometimes it can feel very, very uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong. And sometimes you might find yourself sobbing at 3 a.m. going, what's going on? But again, all of that turbulence can just be a way of processing out all the shit, all of the crap. So again, if you can just ride it out, sit with it, there will be light at the end of the tunnel, and there will be a stronger you that emerges. There really will. And I think as well, a little note on grief. I liken grief to an animal, like a wild animal, like it knows how to guide you through the process. That's what I discovered. At first, sometimes when it's in its acute phase, it can feel like the waves are huge and they will pull you under. And that can feel a bit scary. But they won't let you drown. If you need to go under for a little while, they won't let you drown, and you'll come back up. And then as time goes by, those waves get less. They get less. And it comes and goes in waves. So, so you get this first surge of emotion, and then it ebbs away a little bit. And then, after a long time, those waves will just be lapping at your feet, and you'll be able to get, a hell of a good perspective on things. So it guides you through. And some people make the mistake of trying to get antidepressants, or trying to just avoid the journey, avoid the pain, not sit with it, not go through it. And they try and repress it. And then you see these people amongst your friends, perhaps, who some 10 years later still seem to be grieving people as though they lost them yesterday. And I would say, if I had to hazard a guess, in the vast majority of those cases, I would say these are people with unprocessed grief. That's what it is. And that actually, if they went and saw a counsellor now and started to talk it out and get it out their system, they'd begin that grief process that they arrested the development of back when the death first occurred. So if this is you, if any of this is you, you're not alone. You're not alone. And if you can just sit with it, ride it out. These can be powerful feelings, and it can be a lot. It can be a lot. But you will come through it. You will come through it. If you can lean into your spiritual stuff, bit of meditation, bit of prayer, walking in nature. Obviously, we all know that from COVID, the healing power of nature. And trying a bit of radical aliveness as well. That is to say, sometimes when life is really hard, we shut down. And you might need to shut down for a while in order to process. Don't try and force anything. But there must be a point when you rejoin life again, when life beckons you and calls you back into the wilder scheme of things. And that's when it can require a little bit of boldness on our part to go, okay, fine, let's do this. Let's go rejoin this, let's go rejoin the party, the madness of it all. I believe in reincarnation. I don't think this is any of our first rodeo on this planet, and I'm not sure it's going to be our last. This is just what we do. But when you touch the vastness of the divine, when you touch that sense of love that is so much greater than anything I could ever describe in words. When you touch that, you start to understand why we're all here and how much potential there is for hope on our planet, because that is there and it exists and it's unceasing. So no matter how bad things get on our planet, no matter how bad it looks, that love is there and it's holding us and it's with us and it never ever leaves us and it's a part of us. And you have a spiritual team on the other side as well. You are not alone and you are never alone. You are very loved and you are here for a reason. And you might forget what that is at times. You might be cursing God at times. You might be going, why? What's going on? We all do this. It's natural. But you're here for a reason. And I think at the moment, when we look at the darkness in the world, and there is much of it, I think one of the reasons that we're here is just to shine our light, just to be love, be as loving as we can and as caring as we can, and just stand in that energy and just be that to our friends, to our family, on a wider scale if you want to do a loving kindness meditation, because I believe that the thoughts that we put into the ether and the intentions and the feelings that we put out there, I think it all helps as well, Nothing that we do is in isolation and nothing is lost. We are all held in this web, in this invisible web. And it's love, it's pure love, So I say that having experienced it, as well as having read about it. That's my experience, of course. I can't prove it to anybody, nor would I try. But the path is there. There is a path there if you wanted to take any steps on the path yourself. So that's my video for tonight. It's basically, if you're finding yourself a bit lonely, a bit lost, a bit discombobulated, a bit messed up, twitching a little bit, maybe hitting the gin, anything like that, you're not alone. And it really is going to be okay. And you're going to be okay. And not only that, you're going to come through this and you're going to be amazing on the other side. You're going to come through it. You can come through it stronger. You really can. Just hold that self-belief. Intent is everything. We know it, right? We know the power of the mind with the placebo effect and all sorts of things. Intent is everything. Hold yourself in high regard. Stand in your power, stand in your strength and shine your light, and it's going to be okay. It really, really will. So that's my message for tonight. I hope this finds you well. I hope it's helped somebody. Take care. God bless. Sending you love.